The old engine groaned as Steve parked in front of the gray building. The car shook, and for a moment he thought the engine noise might push away the strange silence piling up outside. It didn't. The silence felt alive, like it was waiting for them. "This isn't exactly what I pictured for November," he muttered. "Happy November 14th, 2025, sis." Joanna checked the analog watch on her wrist, like avoiding screens could protect her from something. "Opening day for the new wing," she said. "And the first death." They stared at the Santa Amelia Shelter Center. The building was too tall, too narrow, full of windows that looked like tired eyes. Some had black plastic taped over them, flapping like weak lungs trying to breathe. In the courtyard, white tents, boxes of supplies, clothes drying on makeshift lines. Children ran around with steps way too light for a place that heavy. Steve felt his stomach tighten. It wasn't fear. It was familiarity. He'd seen places like this before. Emptiness someone tried to fill with too much life too fast. Places that didn't want to be used. "Look over there," he pointed. In a corner of the courtyard, there was a newly installed metal door that didn't match anything around it. Above it, a sign. "Restricted area. Staff only." Below that, another notice taped on. "Rest wing. Do not enter." Nothing about that door said rest. Joanna opened the car door and was hit by cold, damp air mixed with the smell of cheap disinfectant and something sweet, almost rotten. A smell that seemed to come from the concrete, not the people. "This place has the kind of air that sticks to you," she said. "Stay sharp." They crossed the courtyard. The ground creaked in a weird way, like the building was too heavy for it. A boy bumped into Steve, apologized, and ran off. Steve watched him for a long second. It was for kids like that they were here. They were the ones who paid the price when something old woke up. Near the main entrance, a man stood waiting, clothes arranged with almost desperate care. The suit was pressed but didn't quite fit his thin frame. His badge hung crooked. The dark circles under his eyes looked deep enough to hide whole weeks. "Dr. Stephen Barry?" Joanna asked. He shook her hand too hard, like he was testing if she wasn't a mirage. "Yes. You're here for the structural inspection?" "The kind the official report doesn't mention," Steve replied. Joanna opened a folder, partially empty, but visually convincing. "You reported clocks stopping, lights flickering, staff hearing footsteps behind the walls, plants growing where they shouldn't. And you're sure it's not mass hysteria?" Barry let out a dry laugh. No joy, barely any breath. "I worked in a special prison," he said. "I saw vampires fake calm until they ripped out throats. I saw a mermaid turn an entire hallway against its own team. Mass hysteria doesn't move roots inside tiles. This is something else." Steve felt his fingers go cold. Special prison. Ancient fae. Roots. All of it lived in the Myers family files, written by their father in stained pages. Like he'd been rushing to write something down before it vanished from memory. The kind of prison where if someone opens the wrong cell, the world ends? Steve asked. "The kind of prison where no one should open anything," Barry replied. "We held a creature there named Vikram, corrupted dryad, ancient, strong in ways you only noticed when it was too late. He tore out his own heart to live forever." Joanna felt her breath shorten. She knew that name. Their father had said it in a low voice, like he was afraid it might hear. "And you think this building is connected?" she asked. Barry glanced around before speaking again, like the walls might be listening. He pulled a yellowed folder from his coat. Inside, photos, a cell full of branches, leaves almost black, roots twisting around glass like fingers trying to break it. In the back, something standing, made of wood and flesh. Eyes pale as the moon. Then, architectural plans. First of the prison, then of Santa Amelia. Straight lines pushed to fit into another structure, older and crooked. On the drawing, the staff wing was marked in highlighter. After 2 escapes, Barry said, the FRB searched for energy patterns similar to the cells. They found it here, in this wing, beneath what was left of the old asylum. Steve noticed something in the plans. The restricted wing wasn't shaped like a normal hallway. It was a circle, like a chest holding something, like a nest. "You think his heart is here?" Steve said. Barry didn't answer with words. He just looked at the metal door again, like he was staring into an open grave. Joanna touched the edge of the blueprint and felt the paper cold, almost damp, like it had soaked something up from the building. The grimoire in her coat felt heavier. "So we're here because you don't want to repeat what happened at the prison." "Because I wouldn't survive it a second time," Barry said. "And because you two seem like the kind of people who don't run when something looks back." As they walked toward the entrance, Steve caught his reflection in a window. Him, Joanna, Barry, and behind them, something thin and dark like branches slipping by. When he blinked, it was gone. He kept the vision to himself. He knew it wouldn't be the last. The makeshift cafeteria felt too full and, at the same time, impossibly empty. There were people, sounds, smells, movement. But underneath it all, there was something silent watching. Something that didn't belong to any of the languages being spoken there. It felt like it came from the walls, like the building had eyes. Joanna walked slowly, noting every detail. The cracked concrete floor, the echo of the industrial AC, the faint vibration in the lights. Everything held a thin tension, like the building was holding its breath. A nurse was scrubbing the tables with so much force her fingers turned red. "Since the staff wing opened, have you noticed anything different?" Joanna asked. The woman stopped wiping. The cloth dripped onto the floor. "The energy," she murmured. "The night shift never ends. The clocks freeze around 3. Always 3. The lights only blow out in that wing, and then there are the whispers." Joanna felt the back of her neck heat up. "Whispers of what? Of someone breathing inside the wall?" the nurse said, barely above a whisper. "And the plant. It grows every day. We cut it back. It comes back. It wants out. It wants to reach us." Joanna saw the real tremble in the woman's fingers. It wasn't drama. It was old fear. Fear that had already taken root in her too. Meanwhile, Steve was in a room too small to be called an office. 2 chairs, a forgotten laptop, a coffee bottle that seemed to be used more like a good luck charm than a drink. He was flipping through the file Barry had handed him. Low-quality printouts, but strong enough to disturb. 1 missing nurse, 2 cleaners, 1 security guard, Steve said. All had access to the restricted wing, all gone within a week. This should be front-page news, but nothing came out. Barry sat with his hands clasped, like he was trying to keep them from shaking. "They all reported the same dream," he said. "Walking through a dark forest, roots up to their waist. A voice offering a second life." Steve slowly closed the folder. The words "second life" left a metallic taste in his mouth. "You only called for help now?" Barry swallowed hard. "Because I saw my father again." Steve looked up. The air got heavier. "What do you mean again?" "Years ago, Vikram showed me a ghoul wearing his face, my father's face." Barry fidgeted with his coat, like he could still feel the moment on his skin. "And this week, a camera in the restricted wing caught something moving too fast. In the freeze frame, the same face. Gray, thin, coming out of the wall." Steve held his breath for a moment. The world sometimes repeated symbols, like warnings. Familiar faces on wrong bodies always meant danger. Joanna walked in just then. She dropped a key ring on the table with a tired smile. "The coordinator gave me access to the restricted wing. They're so scared. Anyone with a badge and a serious face gets a free pass." "Why only now?" Steve asked. "The whole building is full of vulnerable people. And someone thought it was a good idea to hide a demon heart in here?" "When institutions want to hide something," Joanna said, "they always choose places no one's really going to investigate." Barry nodded. "The FRB always does that. If the heart is here, the rest of him is close. Still weak, but coming. And when it gets here, it's going to want roots. Flesh. People." Steve rubbed his face. He could smell the thin soup mixed with the dry mold in the walls. The cafeteria noises felt too short, like they were being cut off before they finished. "Then we need to find that heart today," he said. "Before that thing fully wakes up. Before it turns this building into a forest of corpses." Joanna opened her coat just enough to feel the weight of the Myers family's grimoire. Its pages held drawings of hearts outside of bodies, connected by roots spreading into human structures. There were notes in the margins about how ancient beings picked strategic places to be reborn. Hospitals, asylums, prisons. Place is soaked in pain. We don't have another night, she said. If the heart is already strong enough to mimic faces, we're already late. Barry wiped his forehead. When he spoke, it sounded like a confession he'd been trying to hide from himself. The building has pulses, he said. Sometimes I feel the floor vibrate, not like a machine, like a heartbeat, like it's breathing with me. Steve looked at Joanna. Joanna looked at Steve. They both knew what that meant. The heart was waking up, and the building was responding. Joanna stood up, grabbed the keys, the grimoire, the marking spray. We've got a few hours, she said, and a place that doesn't want to be found, but we're going in, and we're finding the heart. In the hallway, just before they left, Steve glanced at the wall next to the door. For less than a second, he saw a fine crack moving, like a root searching for light. Then everything went still. Did I see that? He asked. Joanna didn't look. You did, she said, and you're going to see more. They kept walking. The goal was clear. Find the heart. Understand the ritual. Break the link between Vikram and this building before it completed the bond. And more than anything, stop the people here from becoming part of the roots. The sign reading, "Staff only, do not enter," swayed slightly on the metal door, like something behind it was breathing. Steve swiped the card Joanna had gotten, feeling the weight of the moment. Every forbidden door they'd ever opened had led to something bad. This one didn't feel any different. Romantic, Steve muttered. First date in the restricted wing. Joanna didn't laugh. Focus. This hallway is where everything begins. She drew a thin line of salt across the threshold. The salt seemed to sink into the floor, like the concrete was thirsty. Steve noticed, but chose not to say anything. The air in there had already made its own rules. The door opened with a dry snap. The hallway was new, but already looked old. The white walls had shadows that didn't come from anything. The lights buzzed with an uneven hum, like they were switching between existing and not. The air smelled like fresh paint mixed with wet wood, a combination that shouldn't happen inside a building. They stepped inside. Their footsteps made no echo. The floor swallowed everything, like it wanted to absorb what little life they carried in. Steve touched the wall with a blade of cold iron. A low hiss followed, a sound like a whisper swallowed too fast. Iron bothered it, Steve said, which means we're either on the right path or the wrong one. Depends on how you look at it. They moved down the narrow hallway, passing closed doors, each showing signs of cheap renovations. Crooked signs, layers of paint hiding something older underneath, wires taped over in white. Nothing pretty, nothing safe. The first room they could access had a sign, "Staff Break Room." The frosted glass was scratched from the inside, like fingernails had pressed against it during long, silent moments. Steve pushed the door open. The air inside was damp, like the room had cried through the night. Plastic chairs were coated in dust. An old TV was turned off, but felt like it was watching them. And there were plants. A lot of them. Vines slipping out of electrical outlets, roots bursting through the baseboards, darkened leaves stuck to the ceiling like small hands trying to escape. Joanna crouched down to examine a thick root cutting through the floor. "This isn't normal vegetation," she said. "It's territorial expansion. He's testing the space." Steve swallowed hard. He's building his own cell. Joanna pulled a makeshift scanner from her pocket, marked with runes. The screen crackled with interference. When she held it up to the tiled wall, the lines trembled. A crack in the surface formed an almost organic shape, like a circle broken by jagged root-like lines. "That looks like a seal," Steve said. "Or a hole where he's trying to break one," Joanna replied. "Whatever it is, it wasn't made by human hands." They kept going. The air in the hallway felt like hours trapped in a single second. Something whispered far away, behind the walls, something that didn't care to be understood. The sound scratched at the back of the ear, making the brain try and fail to translate. "You heard that?" Steve asked. Joanna didn't stop. "I did." She opened the next door, an abandoned janitor's closet full of broken buckets and water stains on the ceiling. The mold curled along the walls like it had a shape of its own. A low noise came from the pipes, pulsing like something breathing on the other side of the metal. They kept moving. Empty bathroom, moldy kitchenette. A file room with drawers open, papers scattered across the floor, and root marks pushing through the lower walls. Everything looked like it had been slowly touched by invisible fingers. At the end of the hallway, there was a heavier door, locked with a padlock far too old for a building like this. A note taped on it read, "Pipe leak." A warning so obvious it had to be fake. Steve looked at Joanna. "If there's one place no one's supposed to go, it's exactly where we need to be." Joanna turned the key. The lock opened too easily. The door swung open slowly, like someone was pushing from the other side. Darkness swallowed them. The smell came first. Wet earth, old wood, dried blood. Steve raised his flashlight. The beam lit up concrete walls covered in dark veins. It felt more like the inside of a massive tree trunk than any man-made room. The floor was damp. Each step echoed hollow, like something was hiding just beneath the surface. Joanna gripped the grimoire inside her coat a little tighter. "We're in," she said, "and it knows." Steve felt the back of his neck go cold, like a long, thin finger was tracing his spine. The hallway behind them slammed shut with a hard thud. The door hadn't been pulled from the outside. Something had pushed it closed from inside the walls. The unknown had just welcomed them in, and they kept walking, because there was no other way forward. The room behind the door felt out of place, like it had been forced into the building. The air was thicker, and every breath came in scratching. The walls weren't smooth, they had uneven waves, like tree bark covered by a thin layer of concrete. It felt like two different structures were fighting for the same space. At the center stood a large metal cylinder. It didn't look new or old, just out of time. Its surface was corroded with dark rust, and the welding marks were uneven, like someone had tried sealing cracks that kept reopening. Thick roots climbed along the sides, diving into the structure and reappearing elsewhere, like living tubes that breathed. Steve moved closer with the flashlight. "Looks like a water tank," he said. "Or some kind of vat." Joanna touched one of the scratched symbols in the rust. The markings were crooked, almost childish, but carried something unsettling. There was an uneven repetition, like someone had tried copying a ritual without understanding it. "They tried to turn this into a cell," she said, "but they didn't know what they were locking in." She opened the Myers family grimoire and flipped through pages filled with clippings and old notes. There was something similar in the descriptions of makeshift containments built by agents who'd tried to stop creatures they didn't understand. Repeated mistakes, incomplete seals, runes copied from memory, desperate measures. Steve tapped the metal twice. The sound didn't bounce back right. It was muffled and slow, like it crossed an impossible distance before returning. "It's way too hollow," he said. The cylinder shuddered slightly. The roots vibrated, reacting to the touch. The door behind them slammed shut. The sound was dry and way too loud for such a small room. Steve ran to it, tried the handle. Nothing. It was as if the door had been welded shut from the other side. The air seemed to change shape. There was a whisper in the room, first low, like wind through tight spaces, then clearer, like broken syllables trying to form. It wasn't human. It wasn't trying to sound human. It was a voice that scratched at thoughts, not ears. Joanna took a deep breath. "It knows we're here," she said. The roots began to move. At first, just a subtle tremor, then a slow crawl across the floor like long fingers reaching for something to grab. Steve backed up, raising the shotgun loaded with coarse salt. "This is wrong," he said. "Everything in here is way too wrong." Joanna circled the tank, looking for cracks, weak points, spots where the metal looked too thin. In one area, there was a narrow tear, like something inside had pressed hard, trying to break out. The whisper seemed focused on that fissure. It sounded like breathing through a thin wall. "The heart is here," she said softly. "But it's not whole. It's spread out, connected to the building, connected to the people who vanished. This is the center of a network." Steve kicked at a root creeping closer. It recoiled a few inches, then moved forward again, testing him. "Then we need to figure out how to weaken it before it really wakes up." Joanna found a mark on the floor, an uneven circle drawn with a mix of paint and something darker. Maybe old blood, maybe something else. The mark looked like it had been made by anxious, shaky hands. An incomplete ritual. Interrupted, or failed. She knelt down, tracing the edge with her finger. Someone tried to open the tank or close it, hard to tell. The whisper grew louder. This time it sounded closer to forming real words. Not in Portuguese, not in English, in something older. Something the mind only recognized as a threat. Thin roots dropped from the ceiling, reaching down like wires looking for skin. One brushed Steve's shoulder, light as a feather, but cold as dead water. He jerked away. "Joanna, we need to get out of here. First, we need to understand how to destroy the core," she answered. "If we do it wrong, he'll release everything at once." Steve looked around. There was no exit. The door was sealed. The ceiling seemed to pulse in silence, and the cylinder trembled again, like something was hitting it from the inside, trying to get out. The flashlight flickered. For a second, Steve saw something inside the fissure. A dark, wet mass with red veins pulsing. Something trapped and alive. Something that seemed to tremble at their closeness. He stepped back immediately. "He's waking up." Joanna shut the grimoire, took a breath, and raised her eyes to the tank. "Then we need to move before he does." The roots responded, moving forward like they'd understood the plan. The room felt smaller. The walls seemed to breathe, and whatever was inside the tank was breathing with them. The cylinder shook for the third time, stronger now, like a warning. The roots had already reached halfway across the room, darkening the floor in a twisted pattern that looked like exposed nerves. With every second, they seemed to grow faster. Steve could already tell. If they stayed too long, they'd be swallowed by it. He gripped the shotgun tighter and took a deep breath, trying to force his body to keep up with his mind. His skin was cold with sweat. The air felt too heavy and thick to be normal. Joanna pulled out her phone with a steady hand. The videos Barry had sent were there. She scrolled down to the oldest one, the one that showed the failure of Vikram's original cell. The screen lit up her face, pale under the flickering beam of the flashlight. She kept the volume low, just enough to hear without drawing whatever was inside the cylinder. In the video, guards entered a room covered in foliage. The voice of the interviewer kept cutting out, even on the recording. The man was trying to speak with something unseen, hidden in the dark part of the cell. The footage shook from vibrations in the ground, and then, gray, thin creatures appeared, lunging with violence. Thick blood splattered across the lens. The guard's breathing echoed, desperate. The sound of the attack drowned everything out. Steve looked away. He already knew that video, but watching it inside this room, with the roots growing in sync with the memory, made it feel far too real. The room was reacting to what they were seeing. The roots pulsed with every movement on screen like they recognized the past they carried. "Joanna, turn it off. It's making everything worse. This place is listening. Wait, this part is important." Her voice trembled, but she kept going. "The heart. Listen to what he says about the heart." She skipped ahead to the moment Vikram's voice, distorted by the recording, spoke about the heart being far from the body. He said the body would never die as long as the focus remained. And he said humans would never understand the difference between killing the creature and destroying what allowed it to exist. Joanna paused on that line. The cylinder reacted with a loud thud, like a punch from the inside out. The room shook. Dust fell from the ceiling in tiny grains. "He hid the heart in impossible places," she said, "and used roots to connect parts of the focus to the environment. It was a network, a distribution of life, a living system built to survive any direct attack." Steve kicked away a root wrapping around his ankle. It pulled back, but only for a moment, then came forward again, like it was testing him. "So you're saying even if we open this tank, it might not matter? We might just release another piece of the creature. If we do it wrong, yes. But there's a right way. Dad wrote it down." She reopened the grimoire. The yellowed pages creaked as she turned them. Some fae split their hearts into roots. Each root holds a part of their consciousness. To destroy the focus, you have to strike the core, and also sever what feeds it. If you don't cut the entire network, it rebuilds itself. Steve knelt and pressed the cold iron against the floor. The roots recoiled harder this time. He looked up. "Then this tank is the core, and this floor is the network." The room answered with another impact. The cylinder seemed to shift, like something inside was pressing against the walls, trying to remember the shape of its own body. The metal groaned. The welded seams vibrated. It sounded like something was pounding inside a box made of bones. Joanna flipped quickly through more pages. She found the underlined passage, the one marked by their father's rushed handwriting in the margins. To destroy a fractured heart, the roots around it must be burned. Break the tie to consecrated ground. Shatter the core with fire and iron. The process is unstable. It may draw the rest of the consciousness. It may wake dormant parts. Act fast. She felt her body go cold. It was the confirmation they needed, but also a sentence of absolute risk. Steve, this is the truth we were looking for. The full focus is here. This building sits on top of the heart. The tank is just the container. The root network goes into the walls, the floors, maybe even under the foundations. If we break the tank without destroying the roots, we'll just release fragments of its mind everywhere. Steve took a deep breath. He looked at the sealed door, the cylinder, the ceiling that looked like it was sweating. The air was already warmer, like the creature was slowly raising the temperature, preparing the space for its own form. Then that's it. We found what we needed. The problem is, there's no easy way out. He adjusted the iron mandrel at his waist. So now what? A thick root, wide as Steve's arm, burst through the concrete near the wall. The sound wasn't like a normal crack. It was wet, like living wood stretching too far. It slammed against the floor and began crawling toward the tank, as if answering a call. The whisper had stopped being just noise. Now it had rhythm, like a breath pulled in with anger. Joanna recognized an ancient pattern in the syllables. It was the voice of something that knew they had found its weak point. She slammed the grimoire shut. Now, Steve, we have to act before it realizes the rest. We need the right plan, and we need to survive long enough to use it. Joanna stood. The cylinder trembled again. The room shook like it was trapped inside something's chest. They had found the truth, and the truth had found them. The plan came together too quickly to feel safe, but it was either that or let the entire building be overtaken by roots that were already breathing like a single body. Steve felt the weight of the decision crash down on his shoulders. It felt like staring into an abyss that stared right back. The room was hot. The air had a metallic taste. The roots vibrated like strings pulled too tight. Joanna held the Myers family grimoire in both hands. Her fingers were shaking, not from simple fear, but from the awareness of what had to be done. The book said that destroying a fractured Fey focus required fire, iron, and isolation. None of that seemed possible inside a building full of scared people. Even so, they had no other choice. Steve, we need a few minutes. Her voice was steady, even though her chest rose and fell too fast. I'll set up the rupture circle. You keep the roots off me as long as you can. He nodded, trying to ignore the sound of his own breathing. It felt too short, trapped. Every 2 seconds, the cylinder shook again. The metal already had small dents. The thing inside was waking up. Or maybe it was already awake, just stretching after years of sleep. Joanna pulled out her phone and sent a short message to Dr. Barry. Cut power to the wing. Start partial evacuation. Gas leak. It was a last-minute cover story, but the only way to get people out without causing panic. If they told the truth, no one would leave in time. Fear freezes. Panic spreads roots faster than any ancient creature. Seconds later, the lights flickered and went out. The room was now lit only by the flashlight clipped to Steve's jacket. The silence that followed wasn't natural. It was the kind of silence that only exists right before something moves in the dark. The roots reacted to the power outage like someone had just pulled a blindfold off the creature. They tensed, then began advancing with focus. No more hesitation. The tips looked like fingers searching for human skin. Steve raised the iron bar and struck the closest one. The touch made the root recoil like a burned animal. He hit it again, but 3 more came in behind the first. Joanna dropped to her knees and began drawing an ancient symbol on the floor. The salt poured in straight lines and perfect circles. The chalk marked rupture runes she recalled from memory. Shards of iron completed the shape. The ritual demanded total focus. She tried to block out the rising heat. It felt like they were inside an oven's mouth. The cylinder groaned every time the metal expanded. Maybe it was the heart pulsing. Maybe it was the building itself trying to resist. Steve felt a larger root slam into the floor near his foot. The concrete cracked. The sound was sharp, too clean. No time to think. He fired the shotgun. The salt shell tore the root open like rotted flesh. Pieces dropped to the floor, dry and pale. Other roots writhed in response. The room felt like it was suffering with each shot. Joanna kept working. She whispered the sequence of words from the grimoire. The language felt rough in her mouth, a blend of Latin, fey terms, and fire commands. Her father had written warnings beside the spell. This rupture is not for beginners. Avoid reverse response. The creature may try to swap consciousness. Do not let it speak to you. Do not let it use your memory. She swallowed hard. Too late to avoid any risks. This was their only shot. Steve was knocked sideways by a root that wrapped around his ankle like a snake. The force slammed him into the wall. Pain shot through him. When he tried to get up, something in his ribs screamed. He pressed one hand to the floor, trying to rise, but another root whipped out and struck his shoulder, knocking the air from his lungs. "Steve, don't stop." Joanna didn't look up, but her voice cut through the heat. "Just a few more minutes." He tried to laugh, but it died in his throat. There were no minutes to spare, no time. The creature knew what they were doing. The cylinder pulsed so hard the painted symbol on its side seemed to shift. The temperature rose again. The air smelled like burning wet wood. It was like the heart inside the tank was breathing faster, glowing like live coal. "Joanna, finish it." Steve stood, one hand on the shotgun, the other clutching his side. "I'll hold it as long as I can." She placed the final shard of iron into the circle. Her palm was trembling. The final symbol had to be spoken aloud. It was what activated the rupture. It was also what drew the creature's full attention. Joanna took a deep breath. Her throat felt tight. In the center of the room, the cylinder started vibrating faster, as if something inside was remembering what it felt like to have a body. She raised her chin and spoke the final verse. The air changed shape. The roots froze for an instant. The cylinder responded with a low sound that rolled through the floor. The sacrifice was made. Now they had to find out who would fall first, them, or the heart that was watching from the dark. The final verse left Joanna's mouth with the weight of something physical. As soon as the syllables spread through the air, the room seemed to shrink around them. The rupture circle lit up in a deep red, like a breathing ember, and the floor vibrated in a slow, pulsing rhythm. Steve felt it beneath his boots like he was standing on top of a giant creature trying to wake up. The roots froze for a second that felt far too long. They stood still, locked in an unnatural stiffness, as if the ritual had pulled every thread of the creature into one place. The silence shifted. Before, it had been the silence of fear. Now it was the silence of something bracing to defend itself. The cylinder in the center of the room reacted with a violent expansion. The metal bulged outward, releasing a high-pitched sound that made Steve clench his teeth to stay focused. He watched a crack open, then another. The water inside rose in pressure, turning cloudy and dark. Something moved beneath the surface, but there was no clear shape. It looked like a shadow with no fixed form, constantly shifting in size. Joanna raised the grimoire and kept her eyes on the edge of the circle. The heat rising from it burned the air around her. The ritual demanded she not move. If she broke the line, the entire process would turn against them. Her throat burned. Her body shook. It felt like the whole room was watching her, waiting for her to fail. Steve saw the roots begin to move again, first with small spasms, then longer, sharper movements. They tried to escape the rupture circle, but the symbol forced the wood to recoil every time it touched the salt and iron. The creature was testing the limits, trying to find a weakness, trying to understand human logic just to break it. He raised the shotgun and positioned himself next to the circle. One shot hit the nearest roots, splitting them into dark fragments. The smell of burning filled the air. More roots dropped from the ceiling, thicker, faster. One of them whipped past his face, close enough to cut the air inches from his skin. He felt the hot wind rush by and stepped back. The cylinder shook hard enough to crack the floor beneath it. Dark water began to leak from the fissures, thick like sap mixed with old blood. The smell was dense, sweet, and rotten all at once. The smell of something that was never meant to be pulled from the ground. Joanna spoke another line from the ritual, activating the second mark in the circle. The light shifted to orange. Flames rose along the runes and spread across the floor, racing like fire serpents to the base of the tank. The roots touching the area caught fire instantly. The sound that came from the cylinder wasn't human, wasn't animal. It was a scraped scream, like it came from a place where voices shouldn't exist. Flames climbed the sides of the tank. The metal heated, cracking. The pressure inside built up. Steve watched the tank twist like it was made of muscle instead of steel. The creature was trying to escape, trying to push its own heart out. He realized their time was almost up. A thick root lunged across the ritual, heading straight for Joanna. She didn't react in time. Steve jumped in front of her, using his body as a shield. The root slammed into his shoulder and threw him to the floor. He heard a sharp crack, maybe bone. Pain rushed through his body. Still, he grabbed the root with both hands and drove the cold iron into it until it burned and split. Joanna kept going, even with her brother injured. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. The words seemed to come alive as they left her mouth. In the grimoire, the lines marked by their father looked darker now, as if responding to the room. The cylinder finally broke. The explosion sent black water in every direction. Chunks of wood and organic matter hit the walls. The roots writhed like nerve endings hit by an electric shock. The creature's final scream filled the space like a hot wave that passed through their bones. Then everything started to collapse. The roots lost their strength. The room went quiet again. The cylinder folded in on itself. The smell in the air shifted from rotting life to rotting death. Joanna slowly stood up. The rupture circle still glowed like embers. This silence was real this time. The kind that only comes when something ancient goes out for good. Steve tried to stand. His body shook, but he managed to brace against the wall. He looked toward the center of the room and saw that if the heart still existed, it wasn't breathing anymore. "Tell me this is over," he said, his voice weak. Joanna took a deep breath. The air finally felt clean. She nodded. The heart had screamed for the last time. Still, even with the wind, something inside her knew nothing would ever be the same. Because monsters like that never die alone. They always leave roots somewhere behind. Smoke was still rising slowly from the cracks in the asylum when they made it outside. The sky was gray, starless, like the night had decided to erase any sign of calm. Ambulance sirens crossed the courtyard louder than they needed to. It was as if every vehicle wanted to make sure the world saw the chaos and understood something serious had happened there, even if no one could quite explain what it was. Steve sat carefully on the hood of the car. An improvised ice pack was strapped to his shoulder with an elastic band. His breathing was short and uneven. Every movement tugged at his injured rib. He tried not to show the pain, but his body failed to keep the secret. He looked at the building and felt a strange emptiness, like part of him had stayed down there, held by the roots. Even after the creature had died, Joanna closed the grimoire before sliding it into her backpack. The pages were still warm from the ritual. Some had dark stains that would never come out. She ran her fingers over the cover, feeling the raised marks carved there by their father years ago. She thought about how that book felt like both a burden and a weapon, an object that kept them alive, but always asked a heavy price. Carrying it meant being dragged into places like that building. It was never any different. Dr. Barry crossed the courtyard with quick steps. He held a manila envelope against his chest like it was fragile. His face was pale, but his eyes had something new in them. It wasn't fear. It looked more like quiet recognition, like someone who had finally accepted they weren't alone in a field that shouldn't exist at all. He stopped in front of the twins and held out the envelope. "I can't include this in any report," he said plainly, "but I can pass it to you." Joanna took the envelope. It was heavy. Inside were several smaller folders, clippings, old blueprints, photos of reinforced cells, bits of interviews, fragments of the history of creatures that shouldn't exist. It felt like holding a collection of mistakes made by institutions that would rather hide problems than destroy them. "Why are you giving us this?" Steve asked. Barry looked at the asylum for a few seconds, then exhaled. "Because you deal with this kind of thing with your eyes open. FRB works with masks, protocols that fail when creatures stop following patterns. You seem to know that none of this has a pattern. I think this information makes more sense in the hands of people who don't pretend things are normal. Joanna put the envelope in the car. And you? She asked. What are you going to do now? Barry hesitated. His eyes flickered like they were trying to see something that wasn't there. I'll keep doing my job, he said. At least for now. It's what I have left. But I'll admit, I'll think twice before stepping into any closed room. And I won't ignore any strange sound from the pipes. Today I learned that some things don't stay quiet just because we want them to. Steve let out a tired half smile, too drained for real sarcasm. Just a heads up. If you ever get a call from a woman who sounds way too sweet, way too calm, offering something that feels way too good, hang up. Doesn't matter what she's offering. Barry squinted. Who are you talking about? Joanna and Steve exchanged a quick look. An old acquaintance, she said. Better not to know the details. If she shows up, call us before making any decision. Barry nodded, even without understanding. Then he walked away to help coordinate the ambulances. He moved like someone who had aged 3 years in a single night. Joanna kept her eyes on the building. The dark windows looked like empty holes. No lights flickered inside. No shadows moved. But she felt something familiar. It wasn't a presence. It was an absence. A silence that felt bigger than the entire building. The kind of silence that only comes when an ancient creature stops breathing. A small girl stood near the entrance. She was holding a blanket, twisting the edge between her fingers. She was staring at a crack in the wall, where a dried root was still stuck. It was thin as a hair and already lifeless, but it still caught the eye. Joanna walked over and gently pulled the root free. It came loose easily. She rubbed the wood between her fingers until it turned to dust. This won't bother you anymore, she said. The girl watched the dust fall to the ground, then nodded. She didn't say a word, just walked back inside with slow steps. Steve stood from the hood of the car, breathing through the pain. He looked at the envelope in the back seat, then at his sister. You know this doesn't end here, he said. We destroyed the heart, not the thing that made someone hide it. Joanna shut the car door. The dull sound echoed through the empty courtyard. I know. But today we stopped one of them. Today a forbidden wing is just walls again. That's already a win. He nodded, even knowing win was too heavy a word for something so fragile. They got in the car. The engine started without hesitation, like it was the only thing in that place still following normal rules. As the vehicle pulled away, the asylum disappeared slowly in the rearview mirror, swallowed by the night. For a few miles, neither of them spoke. The road felt long, but familiar. The weight of the envelope in the back seat was a reminder. There was more work waiting. More ancient creatures. More roots buried in the wrong places. But it was also a reminder that they were still alive. Joanna finally broke the silence. Let's get out of here before someone decides to renovate that place again. Steve pressed the gas a little harder and left the asylum behind. The world felt quiet. Strangely quiet, but quiet enough for a few minutes for them to breathe like ordinary people. At least until the next call.